Happy 100th birthday, FRE.
Whoa, that's even older than you, Caleb.
I'm only a few years older than you, Elena. Calm down.
Like Caleb said, I'm Elena Poulin, he is Caleb Stair, and this is FRE Lunch,
the official podcast of the Food and Resource Economics Department at the University of Florida.
This season is all about our greatest hits. Well, FRE's greatest hits.
It's part of a broad effort to showcase all the cool things FRE has done and is doing.
And with that, on with the episode.
From recalls to research, today's episode is all about how great I am at my job.
That's right. Wait, restart. Today's episode is all about food safety recall research done by one of our undergraduate students for her honors thesis.
Yeah, well, I signed off on it too, so...
Anyway, we usually assume that our food is safe, in part because of the policies in place to make sure it stays that way.
From hand washing stations to temperature regulations on the truck that brought your food in, our food supply chain is heavily regulated for your safety.
But try as we might, there is no such thing as perfectly zero risk. In 2025, there were 42 total recalls.
Now, 42 might seem like a small number in the grand scheme of things, but those recalls accounted for more than 71 million pounds of food. To put that into perspective, that's almost 550,000 Elenas. And anytime we hear about these recalls, it can result in a huge loss of consumer confidence.
Just how large of an impact can a single food safety event have? Well, to unpackage the answer to that, we are joined today by Morgan Smith, recent alumni of our FRE undergraduate program, winner of the J. Wainwright's Medal of Excellence for 2026, and an all-around stellar student.
Hello, my name is Morgan Smith, and I am a graduating senior here in the Food and Resource Economics Department. My track was in the Agribusiness Marketing and Management track, and then I also picked up a minor along the way in food science. And then I also do a couple clubs on campus, so Agricultural Economics Club. I teach a first-year seminar course called First Year Florida, and I've done a couple of extension projects as well.
Our other special guest is Dr. Suzanne Thornsbury, FRE professor, former USDA member, extension expert, and Morgan's research project advisor. A real couple of slackers on the podcast today.
Hi, everybody. I'm Suzanne Thornsbury. I'm a professor here in Food and Resource Economics Department, and I focus on specialty crop supply chains. So for folks that aren't into the jargon, maybe specialty crops, fruit and vegetables by and large. And I look at really what are the current and anticipated shifts that are impacting those supply chains. So changes in technology, policy changes, business relationships, what are the opportunities in the market? And that seems really broad, but the common theme there is what are the forward-looking sort of risk management things that are impacting our Florida industries, and what can they do?
Now, here in FRE, we are often a found major for our students. Many have never even heard of food and resource economics before they get to college. However, for Morgan, she found out she was interested in our field back in high school.
When I was in high school, I took an AP environmental science course and I liked it, but then there was one unit on agriculture that some reason just really stuck with me. And so I told my parents, I'm going to go to school for agriculture. And they didn't quite understand, but they understand now because I talk about it so much. And so I kind of just really liked the idea of food security advocacy, understanding why people eat what they eat, and then what goes into play when they make those food decisions. So I really fell in love with the marketing aspect and the market research aspect, which I didn't realize what it was at the time. But that's definitely what it is the market research and more of the kind of policy and the sociological side of food and resource economics is where I definitely see myself fitting into the space.
Meanwhile, while Suzanne was already interested in agriculture, she actually started out in animal sciences.
So on my end, it was very much a found major, I have to say. I feel like I should say back in the day, but my undergrad work was in animal science. So I was in the agriculture lane, but hadn't really thought much about the markets or the economics or, just what was driving these industries forward. So like a lot of students that find their way to our major. I took a class with a fantastic professor and was hooked ever since. I was like, oh yeah, this is what's driving it. And so that's what brought me in.
Despite their differing paths to our program, once they were here, Morgan and Suzanne were able to bond over their shared interest, which is what led to their research collaboration.
So I could tell the story. During my sophomore year, I attended the FRE scholarship banquet, and I just so happened to be sitting next to Dr. Thornsbury, and we were, doing the small talk and everything like that. And so I was telling her about how I wanted to go into USDA and policy, and she was like, oh, I used to work with the USDA. And I was like, oh, isn't that a coincidence? And so then we kind of just started talking from there.
After that fateful meeting, Morgan took her steps into the world of research by helping Dr. Thornsbury as a research assistant during her sophomore year.
And so I kind of was working on a lot of the literature review and then kind of doing research on where does the Florida specialty crop industry stand right now? And then in terms of the technology in the world and in the ag industry that they're trying to introduce, how does Florida fit into it is kind of what I was doing at that time.
And those first steps for Morgan, well, they didn't start with a lecture on the basics or anything like that. From the very beginning, she was right in the heart of a major ongoing project.
When I asked Morgan to get involved in that first research project, I feel like we almost pushed you in the deep end a little bit because it was quite a big project. There were people from multiple universities, there was industry people, there was government people. We were at the beginning and trying to find our way. So it's that murky part of research where you're trying to get better defined what you're going to do. So there wasn't like a clear 1, 2, 3 task list to give like you might ideally want to at times. But, Morgan was able to jump in and help us think through some things, help us focus, help us get some of that work done. She did a really nice report out to that project team at one of our meetings. So I think it has just evolved from there.
Since that first foray into research was so successful, the only obvious next step, if you ask the honors research coordinator...
Aren't you the honors research coordinator?
Well, yes. So if I asked myself, it would be an honors thesis.
Aha. Well, that is what Morgan ended up doing. But for this project, even though she was working with the same advisor, she was in the driver's seat from start to finish.
Morgan and I had really good conversations when she was trying to hone her honors thesis down to something that could be done, right? That was manageable in the time frame. So started with very, very big ideas like, oh, let's do something related to food safety. And we had to come from there all the way down to something that could be done. But it really, she drove that process, right? I mean, I asked the questions. I may push or tweak one little way or another, like, we got to find data, that kind of thing. But it's very rewarding to see students grow and bloom and their ideas take off.
It was through these conversations that they were able to settle on an initial thesis idea that encompassed Morgan's interests.
So I kind of knew that I wanted to do something relating to the 3 things that I really like in the ag industry, and that's policy, market research, and then the food safety piece of it. And so when we were coming up with this thesis, I was like, let me do something that pretty much combines all 3 of them. So we came up with the food recall. What are the market implications? And then what are the policy implications of it?
To get a better idea of how a food recall would affect a business, Morgan and Suzanne used the company Chipotle to look at 2 real-life examples of recent recall events.
Because she looked at 2 different case studies, 2 different outbreaks, but the same company, right? So different underlying causes, different things that were happening. And so what she was able to look at in this sort of complex food safety system is to how are the characteristics of particular outbreaks, how does that impact the market? And is it different? Is it the same? What happens? Again, looking at sort of consumer confidence from the, Google Trends data, looking at what happens to the business with their financial statements. So she really was able to dig into the details and look at some of the underlying things that drive particular recalls.
Being able to look at 2 different recalls with different causes and different scales but handled by the same company led to some interesting insights.
The first one was 2015 with E. coli, and it kind of, you could see the difference because that one stretched across multiple states. So they're like, okay, this could be a supply chain issue rather than an in-house issue. Whereas the second one was in 2018, and that was with Clostridium perfringens. And so that was an in-house issue where they were handling the food incorrectly at that particular store. So you could see the difference in how Chipotle handled it as well, because for the first one, they kind of were just addressing the masses saying, hey, there's an issue and we're getting it under control. With the second one, they actually went in and decided to do this training program to make sure that their employees were handling the food correctly. So the reactions to the two were different, even on the firm standpoint as well.
Well, the project idea came from Morgan's interests. It was a perfect fit with Suzanne's USDA background as well.
So I think from the policy perspective, sort of bringing that national intersection between policy, what happens on the ground, what happens in businesses, what happens, on individual operations and the markets, right? Because we're economists in our souls. So that's going to bring things together. So I think that was a big part of it because that intersection aligned with where Morgan's interests were also. I think the other thing that aligned for me is I've worked on food safety issues for a long time. I did this at USDA. I was part of a team that worked on the produce safety rule that was published in 2015, how that was going to impact farms, what that was going to mean, what the requirements were in that rule. And so it really fit very well to have this intersection between food safety, policy, and markets. And I was super happy to see that come together.
To answer the questions they had, Suzanne and Morgan used a combination of Google Trends data and the company's financial statements as reported in their public SEC filings.
The main thing that we found was that when food safety recalls come up, people have an initial reaction to stop interacting with the business. So in the case of Chipotle, everyone on the news is saying, oh my goodness, people are getting sick. It's not safe to eat right now, potentially. So as a consumer, they don't really want to go in and buy the food anymore. So you can see that reflected in the dips in their financial statements as well. Their performance was down in the periods of time immediately after. But then if you look at the Google Trends data to see okay, are people actively looking and searching about the food safety recalls in Chipotle, you would see that there would be a huge kind of peak and then it would drop down after about a couple months or so. And so it just kind of showed yes, the fear, I guess you could say, of consuming Chipotle was still there. But eventually people went right back to eating it because, it's established itself as such a brand identity and it's established itself as this amazing, convenient place to go and get some food for a pretty valuable price at least 10 years ago. And so that was just something that people reacted to.
According to Suzanne, one of the reasons that this research is so important is because of how intrinsic food safety is to our daily lives.
From my perspective, when I think about this research, food safety is it's such a relevant issue for consumers, for businesses, for every single one of us, right? I mean, food is something that touches each of us every single day. And we start from the assumption that what we eat is safe. And that's largely because our food supply here really is one of the safest in the world. So that's not a bad place to start. So when there's an announcement of a food safety recall, some sort of recall event or some outbreak event, it's not surprising that there's a drop off in consumer demand that happens pretty quickly, right, as we shift away. And then there's subsequent impacts on the businesses and the supply chains that are supplying that food. And so there's a shifting in the market that takes place.
Now, certainly, if you are in the food industry, understanding how your consumers may react to a potential product recall or food safety issue is useful.
It definitely helps for the businesses themselves to understand, hey, these are the repercussions of a food safety issue. I hope that it allows them to take on more of a responsibility in saying we need to make sure that our food is safe and making sure that not only that you're assuring and building that PR relationship with your customers to say, hey, you can trust us with your food. We care about what's going into your body. And that's definitely a good it's kind of like an eye opener into like, okay, this is how consumers are expected to react in the event that we have some kind of food safety issue like this one.
Now, for our audience who are potentially interested in pursuing research, let's take a peek behind the scenes at the less glamorous side of the process. Since this is a long-form project tailored to each student, there are an endless number of pathways to completion. This means one challenge can often be figuring out how to best manage your time.
With that flexibility of creativity also comes the flexibility of your schedule. And so I had to make sure that I was taking time to work it in. And it came to the point that I was like, Dr. Thornsbury, you need to help me make a schedule week by week of what we're going to have done on certain days. And so we sat there and we made the schedule. And it's like, ever since that, it was like, okay, smooth sailing.
Now, obviously, Caleb here would be out of a job if these research projects were all challenges, no reward.
Hey! Yeah, I guess that's true. But thankfully, I agree with Morgan and most of our other students that this is ultimately a rewarding experience.
I can definitely say it made me feel, oh my goodness, I'm accomplished. This was my project that I kind of got to come up with from start to finish.
And speaking from personal experience, working on these types of projects is deeply rewarding for faculty members like myself and Suzanne as well.
So I will say, I think we have wonderful undergrads at University of Florida and in FRE and in our affiliated departments, because a lot of times they'll cross over and take our classes. They're smart, they're curious, they're all the things you would expect, right? Because they're here. But they're also very driven by a passion to make a difference, right? A difference in the world, a difference in the state, a difference to the communities that they live in. So they're not constrained by the past. They're not constrained by saying, oh, we have to do what we've done, or we have to, we're kind of stuck here. But what I find is a lot of times the undergraduates in particular take a very futuristic look. They're going to bring a fresh perspective. They definitely bring a fresh energy to these questions because we kind of agonize over them and they're like, but wait a minute. Here, have you thought about this or thought about that? And so I think it's hugely enjoyable to work with that energy and to have it interjected, but also it's not just the energy, it's the smarts that they bring to the table, right? It's also very rewarding to watch them grow and figure things out.
Now we can sit here and wax poetic about the epic highs and lows of undergraduate student research. But at the end of the day, this is a 15-minute podcast, and the best way for students to truly get a feel for what it is like is for them to experience it for themselves.
So my advice is if you're on the fence, just do it. And I hate to be like, what is that, cliche? But honestly and truly, just do it. I was also overwhelmed by the thought and the idea of doing an honors thesis, but truly it is your own personal project. I would say come up with a topic that you are genuinely interested in, and that will really help motivate you, because if the passion is there, the work is going to show for itself. And so that would be my advice. If you're on the fence, please just go for it.
Not only do you get to test the waters if you are considering grad school, but you also learn things, not just about your topic, but your own skills and interests that are just not accessible within the confines of a typical classroom experience.
You can be strategic with your honors thesis as well. Like I said, I made sure that I covered all the bases that I thought my resume needed strengthening in. If you want to do your honors thesis on something that you want to do in the future, like that is your personal project. It's great to talk about it in an interview. And it's just a great experience to go through a entire process from point A to point Z and have it be all yours. So that's definitely something that I would tell some undergrad students.
Yeah, I think the thing I would add to that is, if you're on the fence, definitely go chat to people. If you're not on the fence, go talk to people. It's interesting. There's students that will have a million ideas. There's students that have a deep passion for one idea. And there's students that'll say, hey, I'm really interested in research, but where do I even begin? What do I do? Well, regardless of which of those categories you might think you're in, just go talk to the faculty. All right. I mean, we're always happy to talk to people. I'll guarantee you, we have a million ideas. We're also super happy to listen to your ideas. You're going to find a place where there's shared interest. I'd be shocked if you didn't. There's so much expertise at UF. There's so much expertise in FRE. So just search widely. go around, talk to people, be open to the experience. I think it really can pay off for you.
Yeah, I definitely say if you're looking for inspiration, you can find it pretty much anywhere, especially in this degree program. Like, I got my inspiration from NPR and then an old Vine meme. So that ended up being what sparked it as well. So you can find inspiration literally anywhere in your freezer, in your fridge as well. So definitely keep your eyes and ears open.
So like we mentioned at the beginning, at the end product, this interview is going to be about a 15-minute episode for our audience. If they only took away one thing from everything we talked about today, what would you want it to be?
My one takeaway would be whether or not you, at this point in your life, your career goals include research or not, or you think they do, or you're not sure, doing an honors thesis or getting engaged in a research project while you're an undergraduate student in any way, shape, or form you do that, it's a great opportunity. You're going to learn new things that you won't necessarily pick up in the classroom. You're going to meet a lot of new people, and you're going to stretch your mind in ways that you didn't even expect. So I would encourage you to go for it. You know, you're at UF, make the most of this experience.
I think my two takeaways, I'm going to do two takeaways. If I could give two takeaways to anybody listening, I would say one, there's inspiration everywhere, so make sure you just go for it. And also, I would say that food safety is super important and the food industry is in great hands.
So it certainly seems that regardless of the plethora of safety standards and policies that businesses, industries, and the government put into place, accidents and incidents are always a possibility.
But by understanding how the events impact consumers and businesses when they happen, we can rely on more than just altruism to keep our food supply safe.
And hopefully our listeners understand that the research process is not reserved for the highest echelons of the ivory tower. Anyone with a question and the motivation to find the answer can have an impact. If you would like to learn more, we'll have links to resources regarding undergraduate research in the episode description.
If you've made it this far, you've finished the entire episode, and we thank you for that. Tune in next time for more food for thought. Thanks again for joining us on this episode of FRE Lunch. We hope you'll come back again for seconds.